Hello, friends, and welcome into the FORE Golfers Network podcast. I'm Bill Hobson from Michigan Golf Live. It's great to have you with us. Please subscribe to the channel if you would. It was on August 9th that something fairly unusual happened. I had just seen early reports about projections for Topgolf that were heading in a rather negative direction, and that Callaway might be looking to get rid of that albatross around their necks. I was actually on vacation in Michigan's beautiful Upper Peninsula. I was sitting on a pontoon on a coolish summer afternoon. I'm actually out there in a Detroit Lions hoodie. I decided I'm going to grab my phone and just share a few thoughts about the news that I had just seen. I had no idea that a 44-second Instagram reel that would eventually go up across the Michigan Golf Live accounts on Instagram and Facebook and X and YouTube would generate nearly 2 million views and thousands of comments, some complimentary, many pretty darn rude. but the thoughts that I expressed were so simple and I thought so logical that I couldn't imagine anybody seeing it differently. Well, today on the podcast, we're going to discuss with a very special guest where we think Topgolf is headed, what it needs to do to improve its future, and what the guest experience is like right now versus what it could very well become. Before we get into all that, let me actually play for you the 44-second reel that I recorded that went viral with almost 2 million views. Really surprised that Topgolf is in a free fall, are you? I mean, it had to eventually go the way of axe throwing and escape rooms. Sure, it was extremely popular when they first opened up all around the country, but then people began to do some math and realized how overpriced the Topgolf experience really is. Now imagine yourself in the place of the people responsible for selling off these monstrosities because they are truly single-use design. It's not like you're going to convert a Topgolf into a school anytime soon, and there's plenty of space in nearby shopping malls. Add to that the explosive growth of in-home golf simulators, and Topgolf is pretty much done for. With that being the foundation, let me bring in my friend Ryan Ballengee from Golf Newsnet, because he also has been writing and doing some research into this Topgolf world. And Ryan, it's good to see you again. It's quite possible that my hyperbolic reel was a little bit dramatic for pronouncing the end of days for Topgolf. But then just a day or two ago, something interesting happened in an official capacity from Callaway. So let's pick up the conversation there. What's going on in this world?
Well, Bill, thanks for having me on first. So Callaway and Topgolf, they became this one company about 3 years ago, right about 3 years ago, almost exactly, October 2021, when their merger was completed. And it sounds like, based on what was announced by CEO Chip Brewer, they're going to split up in the second half of 2025. They're going to put Topgolf as a spun-off company into its own silo. It's going to be its own publicly traded company. And then they're going to take all the other brands that they own, Callaway Golf, Travis Matthew, OGO, Jack Wolfskin, even Top Tracer, which I think is interesting. And they're going to make that its own company. And that's just going to be Callaway Golf brands or whatever. And they'll operate totally separately. And that is with the intent of trying to kind of massage their one business that is completely different than the others into its own thing, with the hope that they can turn it around and make it more sustainable.
My impression is, and I'm far from being a market analyst or an expert in these things, but it really looked like over the course of the last couple of years that Topgolf was a major drag on the Callaway stock performance, right? So they're still setting records with selling their clubs, and yet the profitability numbers coming out are pointing in that downward trend that nobody wants to be a part of. Is that what leads to a separation like this?
Maybe in part. I mean, I think the goods numbers, from Callaway and the apparel brands, those were fine. They're not much higher or much lower. They just kind of are what they are. And golf's kind of a mature business in that regard. It's really hard to grow as a golf company or an apparel company for that matter. But I think a lot of people put their eggs in the basket that Topgolf was going to continue to grow with this aggressive rate, because when you looked at their expansion plans and the money that came with it, even from 4 years ago, the amount of money that comes in the door from Top Golf locations has basically doubled. So in one sense, that's good. The problem is almost all of that growth has come from expansion. And there's been a detraction of growth, negative growth, from the existing locations. So after some period of time that a Top Golf's been open, the shine wears off. The customer pool that hasn't experienced Top Golf's experienced it, and they're not coming back in the same numbers that they show up when a new center opens.
Yeah, and we'll talk in a moment about just the Top Golf experience, right? I just want to make sure that everybody understands there's a difference between healthy today and projected health down the road. That's why I used in my little 44-second reel, I used the comparison to escape rooms and axe throwing, because they're for a span of time, there was an explosive growth in both of those categories, those attractions, however you want to label them. And now, I mean, do people go throw axes on a regular basis? Yeah, there are a few leagues here and there and some strip malls and, a bar and that kind of thing. But would you want to invest in that right now? And I don't think so. So my belief is, and Ryan, I've said this a bunch of times over the years, I'm not smart enough to be a billionaire. I've been fooled by many of them many a time, but I don't think if Callaway's financial prognostications were, hey, this is still on the rise, I don't think they would have sought to spin it off, right? Companies usually like things that improve their bottom line.
Right. Yeah. If it's not a drag and it's not a problem, why are you intending to kind of put it in its own corner? And I think that's probably right. I mean, the spin from Chip Brewer was that the demands of the Top Golf business in terms of cash flow, in terms of what they need for lending and financing, those are different demands compared to their apparel businesses and their soft goods businesses. And that is true. That is not a lie. However, the problem is Top Golf still has a lot of debt, and it's going to maintain a lot of debt moving forward because it costs a lot of money to build every single one of their planned expansion posts, and you've got to maintain them. There's an inherent maintenance cost, and I would somewhat argue that they've kind of neglected those to a degree.
Yeah.
So they need to kind of have a separate company in Brewer's thinking to be able to handle the costs, focus on that business line in particular. But I don't understand why you can't have that within the existing company and just assign people differently or have a different corporate chain or a corporate structure. I don't know. I don't think it needs to be its own separate company to do those things, which leads you to believe that they see this as a troubled asset and one that may or may not recover with the proper investment.
Well, pure conjecture on my part is that if some prospective buyer were to walk into the Carlsbad headquarters at Callaway and say, hey, I'd like to take that Top Golf thing off your hands, they would grab the red carpet that's rolled up back in the janitor's closet and they would roll it right out in that little entryway by the reception desk and maybe even carry that person on their shoulders into the conference room to to close that deal. Um, I in the comments and the actually thousands of comments that have come into my various feeds from that little commentary that I did, along with, the insults about my hair, that I must be an elitist, that clearly I've never been to a Top Golf, and that kind of thing. There were some actually very agreeable and complimentary thoughts that came in as well. And most of them in that category centered around, I went to Top Golf a couple of times. I don't ever need to go back, and I can't believe how expensive it was. And it seems to have come back to that. Top Golf, from a customer interaction standpoint, has sort of revised their model in the early stages. And there's one about an hour from me, and I was there for the ribbon cutting, and we did some fun things. And I get, you and I are both not looking at these things from the standpoint of an average consumer because we're in the golf industry, right? So we understand.
Sure.
we have some opportunities to go to things and see them from the inside. And I remember talking with the proprietor of that Top Golf, and it couldn't have been more excited. Um, had a $42 million startup cost between the franchise fee, the real estate, which is right on I-75, and then the bricks and mortar, the build of this colossal facility. And I started talking to him about the math and how all that works. And I said, man, 42. I mean, I don't know what construction costs. This was before the pandemic, so it was a little more reasonable. I said, man, that is a lot of golf balls and stall rentals. And he said, oh, I don't think you understand the model. We're never going to make that money back with people hitting golf balls and renting stalls. It's all through the food and beverage, and it's mostly through the alcohol consumption and sales. And he talked about the Vegas Top Golf, and he said they actually made, and they're more elaborate with swimming pools and all of that. He said they actually recouped their investment within 2 years. Blew my mind. And he said, we are projected to get back to even within 3 years. And they have. So good for them. And by the way, I got nothing against Top Golf. Y'all want to go have fun. Go have fun. It's a fun, for me, it's a fun one-off. Don't take your own clubs.
Yeah, please don't do that.
Don't go there to work on your game.
So that's also part of the problem, by the way.
Yes.
That the perception of Top Golf is that it's not for golfers. And you've excluded 25 million people in this country who play golf, and half of them who really try to work on their game, by saying the culture of this place is not to try to grind out practice sessions on the range. This is more like a bowling alley. Come have fun with your friends, not grind out a jumbo bucket to work on your transition on your 7-iron.
Very true. And Top Golf will tell you that 80-ish% of their customer base comes from outside what you would consider to be avid golf world. 80% is a large number, but it also indicates people who may do it as a 1 or a 2 off visit because, all right, I've been there, I've done that. It cost me $200 and I can probably do some other things for that amount of money. And if I love the game of golf, I might just go play around golf. So where do you think this all heads? Do they just continue to rely on the people who've never been there and somebody says we should go try that? And is that a sustainable business model?
No, I don't think that it is. I mean, I think if you look at, again, I kind of bring up the bowling example, but when I was a teenager, like nighttime bowling was a huge thing among my age group. Like you go every Friday, Saturday night, a lot of weeks, and you would go pay your 14, 15 bucks and hang out and talk with your friends and mess around till midnight. And that was great. It was 14 bucks and you were done. But you walk into a Top Golf, even at the lowest price time of day, it's $37 an hour to rent a bay.
Yeah.
At the highest price time of day, it's $70. So if you want to go when most people go out on a weekend and you go with a group of 4 for a couple of hours, you're already in for 140, 150 bucks before you even start thinking about drinks and food. And you're going to drink and eat. I mean, that's the way it works. So now you're well over $200. And what did you get for that? And if you just got some drinks and to hit a bunch of golf balls, you could take the golf ball part out of it, go somewhere else and do the drinking and eating and more of it for that same amount of money. Yeah. And if you're someone like us and you got a family and you want to take your kids or something, it's not like you're splitting the cost. Like if it's 4 adults, you can go, okay, it was 200 bucks, 50 bucks a person. That's not so bad. But if I go with my wife and 2 kids and we do the same thing, even on an afternoon on the weekends, we're still in for at least $100 before we really even start talking about doing anything. And the kids are going to want drinks. They're going to want dessert. They're going to eat. Now I've got a food bill and a drink bill and a golf bill. And that's not so great either. And if you're an individual, and I was talking about this with a friend actually last night, and he said, well, for $37 an hour at that rate, just that 1 hour rate, I can go play 18 holes at our municipal course down the street, get 4 hours of entertainment, I can go buy 6 beers for 25 bucks, and it would still cost me less than Top Golf. So
Yeah.
The value proposition for a golfer is not great. It doesn't make sense for people with families, and it doesn't even really make sense for people who have expendable income and they can split it together. So it just kind of doesn't line up. They've got to refocus how they appeal to people, the casual people, and there are a lot more of them than golfers, but also find a way to appeal to golfers who are going to be your consistent customer if you do it right.
My production director for my TV show wanted to take his son and his friends because it was a kind of a bachelor party for his son. So they went down, they did the whole everything you just described. They did the stall there. I think there were 8 of them total. I'm not sure if that was the exact number. And a little bit later, I knew they were going, and I had called down because I had a colleague who works there, and I said, "Could you help him out a little bit with something?" And they helped him. Okay, so check this out. He helped him with the stall rental. I think they got it for nothing or $10 or something like that. They were there for 2 hours. Uh, my production director Greg is not a heavy drinker. He'll have a couple of beers here and there. Their bill for the 2 hours with just food and beverage was over $500. And they didn't drink like crazy. So it was just, they had a lot of food. And he said to me later, he goes, "Hey, the guys had fun, so I'm not going to worry about it. It's no big deal." But he says, "I'll never do that again." So there's the sticker shock component of it all that I think catches people on the tail end. It's probably like that whole casino experience. Like you walk out to your car 4 hours later and go, "What just happened?" and and where did it
Yeah.
all go? I want to explore with you for a minute the golf experience there at Topgolf. Um, you mentioned a few moments ago the maintenance needs, the upkeep, and not only from a facility standpoint, but the golf equipment that's of course provided by Callaway goes through a tremendous beating. If your clientele is 80% not a golf crowd, then they don't know how to treat a club. These things are getting the tar beat out of them. And of course, the balls are just being pummeled day after day after day after day. And by the time you get there, man, you're hitting a sponge for the most part. Um, from the golf experience, if the Top Golf solution is, we need to start appealing to actual golfers again. What is an actual golfer going to enjoy at Top Golf?
Good question. I think if you're trying to appeal to a golfer, you almost have to create an experience that's more like a driving range, right? You can't have people pay by the hour to use a bay if you're coming as an individual to work on your game. I'm not paying $37 an hour to hit golf balls that I have to wand off a sensor to come out, and I'm just not. I'm not going to get that value. I'm going to go to the driving range and hit a jumbo bucket or something. So you need to price that differently for a golfer, and maybe that says, okay, we've got this 3-level facility. The first level, we're going to have 5 bays or 6 bays that are just for hardcore golfers. There's no games. You can't play any of the games. There's no food service. Well, you can have food service, but not the same level food service. You have a wait staff for you. You don't have really any kind of frills to it, but to hit golf balls and use the top tracer that'll give you the line of your shot, distance, spin, all those numbers that you would love to get from a rangefinder.
Maybe you hit
say, okay,
maybe you hit some good balls too.
right, and make the proper investment in balls that look like they haven't been hit 10,000 times each.
Yeah,
and price it that way. Say, okay, we'll give you 50 balls for $12, 100 balls for $20. I mean, we're just making stuff up here, but price it more like a driving range, a premium driving range experience where you get a little wait staff or food service. You get the top tracer component of it. It's a little bit more of a fun atmosphere if you care about such things to work on your game, and you're out the door. Offer a membership component too. Offer a monthly membership. Make it $100, just making it up, right? Most people don't ever use the full value of their memberships. That's latent money. People come in, make it really easy. Make it a nationwide kind of membership,
a black
like a
card, like
gym,
a
right?
Planet
Like the
Fitness
LA
black
Fitness
card.
down the street.
Yeah.
or the Lifetime Fitness. You can use every single facility for that monthly membership.
Hmm.
No one's ever going to do that, but it's a nice benefit.
Right.
And appeal to those golfers that way. So that way you have people in the bays that are going to be there paying to use it pretty much all the time, because it's also heated, which is nice in the wintertime if you want to practice and you don't have a simulator. And there are some benefits to having that kind of consistent income that comes in the door. But you also have to price it. You can't price it like you price everything else. So you have to take away some benefits,
Right.
and you kind of have to refocus what the value proposition is.
For folks who are in the now mindset, like they just went to Top Golf and they had to wait 2 hours to get a stall, and so they can't imagine why these two old bald guys are talking about the perilous days ahead for Top Golf. Um, what's the lifespan here? What do you think is the near term and far term ramifications of all of these issues we've been talking about, and the Callaway I don't know, spin off or separation or sending them to a timeout chair or however you want to call it? What's the long term play here?
But I think, to be clear, we should say, I mean, their big issue here is an 8% drop in existing venue revenue, right? 8% doesn't sound like a lot, because it's not a lot. But that means you have your high prime time rates doing pretty well. Your Friday nights, your Saturday nights, probably pretty full up. And that's a good thing. And that's probably going to continue for a while. But we all know the economy's kind of starting to slow down, if it hasn't slowed down already. Um, People are kind of going to get more picky about what they do with their time if they're trying to save a little bit of money. So instead of 90% occupancy on a Friday night, it's 85, 75% occupancy. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but it adds up over 100 locations
Hmm.
every weekend, 52 weeks a year. The bigger problem I think that they have is trying to keep people at locations during non-prime hours. Those lower priced hours are lower priced for a reason. But if you can have people in at those hours and you're not necessarily disturbing that core weekend fun business, then you can balance out those two demands and not really change the experience so much that you might turn off those people who are willing to pay $70 an hour.
I was thinking about this investability concept. I've been listening to some business podcasts, and I'm fascinated by those who walk in that space. I really don't, so I try to glean some wisdom from them. And they often talk about investability in different categories, not in the world of sports necessarily, but one of the categories would be the world of entertainment. And I thought, if I had, just laying around, I had $100,000 just to invest somewhere, would I be more likely in the entertainment realm to invest it in a Top Golf stock, a movie theater stock, the axe throwing escape room world, or would I want to go and put it into something entirely different, which is probably some sort of an augmented reality that you can have into your home setting? And whether it's a full golf simulator like we've built here for Michigan Golf Live, or whether it's some other thing that doesn't take up quite so much space and isn't quite so expensive, but brings you the more immersive experience without all of the ancillary expense that comes. It's kind of the same thing that professional sports are battling against. It's arguably, and I say this as a guy who tomorrow will be at the big house for Michigan, Texas, it's arguably more enjoyable to stay at home and consume on your 75-inch 8K television a major sporting event. I wonder if that's part of this equation in the entertainment realm in general. And yeah, Top Golf is fun. I understand that the 20 something crowd still loves to go out, have a good night, have a blast. Don't care what what any of the experience is like from an operational standpoint. They just wanted to be with their friends. So take me into the $100,000 of just lay around money in the entertainment realm. And would you put one dime of it into Top Golf?
I don't think that I would, and there are a couple reasons for that. One, specific to Top Golf, is the amount of money that you have is guaranteed cost, no matter what, when you create a venue. That $40 million that you talked about for the one near you, well, that's gone up over the course of the pandemic for a couple of reasons. One, real estate's gone up. Construction costs have gone way up, 30-40%. Just basic materials have cost way more. Also, labor has gone up. And then you add in that money isn't free anymore. Interest rates are way higher. Lending rates are higher. And yeah, that's going to start to come down here probably in the middle of this month from the Fed, but it's still going to cost more to maintain lending facilities and lines of credit. And when you take that money, it's going to cost more to borrow it. So you're not going to be beating inflation with free money. You're going to have to actually lend at a rate higher than inflation. It's hard to beat that in the long haul. So it's going to cost you $60-70 million at a minimum to open a Topgolf. And that takes much longer to recoup that in an environment where people aren't spending as much money. They're much more price sensitive, and your product isn't as cool or popular. And that's a big problem in trying to invest in anything that is trendy, right? Bars and restaurants fail all of the time for a reason. Bowling used to be cool. People used to go to sporting events more instead of watching other TVs. Tastes change, and they change quickly. And when you have a business that has a massive infrastructure required, you can't just pivot and change. You can't just start a new version of the business and move on. And for a Topgolf, that means you have to deal with the fickle nature of being trendy, the fickle nature of bars and restaurants, the fickle nature of the economy. That's a tough business to win in the long haul. And that's why these types of entertainment-based stocks tend to struggle, like at Darden Restaurants, or let me think about Red Lobster. Red Lobster was one bad unlimited shrimp promotion away from bankruptcy. One. That's all it took.
Yeah.
Cost them $13 million and they were done. So it can happen very quickly in this industry. It makes it very hard to invest in something that is subject to whims and isn't especially reliable.
I am ashamed of myself for not having put together the Topgolf Red Lobster connection. That's on me. Well done. Well done. And by the way, I want everybody to understand, I'm not just yelling, get off my lawn. The first time I went to a Topgolf, I was blown away. I absolutely head over heels loved it. Thought it was going to be the biggest thing in the history of innovation and entertainment. And I'm not alone in that. I mean, obviously, a major investment from Callaway went into that same idea. But trends are trends. Economy fluctuations impact how people spend their entertainment dollars. I mean, let's keep in mind that this is discretionary spending. So if times get tight, I heard it described to me once in a nonprofit fundraising seminar, because I do some consulting with nonprofits. The gentleman who was leading this session described everybody's personal finances as being like a stepladder. And the higher up on the stepladder would match the higher priority in your world. So for instance, if you were an elderly person, the highest things on your stepladder would probably be the money you have to allocate for your day-to-day living, for your medication. And then as you make your way down the ladder, you have your grandkids and you have the other concerns and the other things. And then somewhere down on the lower part of that ladder would be the donations to the charitable organization, right? And even though it's important to that person, if times get really super tight, those bottom rungs are going to have to go, because those are discretionary decisions that they're making. The same thing is true in the entertainment world. You have your light bill, your kids' braces, your vehicle insurance, your blah, blah. We can go all the way down the list on this big ladder. And somewhere down there, maybe even beneath your Netflix subscription, I don't really know, but somewhere down there is discretionary spending. And if that value proposition changes so that you never feel like, or you stop feeling like, that was $200 really well spent, then the recipient of those $200 is in trouble. And I think that's where we are.
Yeah, I mean, the ladder, the thing I learned in sociology in college, Maslow's hierarchy of needs of,
Yes.
you go after the stuff that's most important to survive, and then everything else kind of falls out into categories from beyond that. That was a little bit more mental than economical, but whatever. So yes, you reach a certain point where you go, do I need to spend this money? If I've got a more pressing need, it's going to that, right? As long as your brain's kind of functioning properly, you go, okay, well, I need to spend this money on the increased cost of groceries, or my rent's going up, or whatever that needs to be. And those discretionary items get shuffled out really quickly. Golf is really fortunate. I think there's some irony in that a golf
Yeah.
company has gotten into this place with a golf entertainment product, because before the pandemic, golf was not in the best place. It wasn't in a horrible place, but it wasn't in a good place. Lots of courses are closing down. There weren't as many people playing. And the pandemic turned out to be a godsend for golf because it brought people back outdoors. It brought people back to the enjoyment of the game. And the game is riding high from that, at least from the perspective of tee sheets being full. We have a course out here in Montgomery County, Maryland, that's going to be reopened after being closed for 10 years because the tee sheets are so full in our 6 municipal courses that they want another one. They're just going to reopen a patch of golf that they closed 10 years ago and still own. That's that crazy.
Yeah.
But we've also seen some pullback in soft goods spend, right? Callaway, Topgolf, or TaylorMade, different companies. You can't convince as many people to buy a $1,700 set of irons if they already did that once in the last 5 years. So we've started to see a softening of that market. At the same time, you've seen a softening of the Topgolf business. Those are connected things, because if you have the money, you feel good, you might spend it. If you don't feel as good about your prospects or what you actually have in your bank balance, you're not going to spend it. And right now, golf itself is still kind of winning out in that battle. People are willing to pay the green fee for 4 or 5, 6 hours of entertainment. They don't feel the same way in the same numbers about Topgolf right now.
Well, imagine being in the strategy meetings then for Topgolf, whether it's across the country or whether it's in the individual markets, and saying, okay, we keep hearing that we're too expensive. So do we need to dial back our overall experiential cost? And if so, how do we service the debt? Because everything else has gotten more expensive. So they're kind of caught in this in-between world where I don't think they're oblivious to the fact that people are turned off by the overall expense for the experience value that you get. But in, like you described, with escalating costs in this bizarre economy that we live in, I don't know that they can really dial things back and still make it financially viable to do that. And by the way, just before I forget, kudos to you for, in the same conversation, invoking both Red Lobster and Maslow's hierarchy needs. I mean, that's why we have you on. That's full circle. That's good stuff.
What I would say is, and we talked about the golf versus Topgolf example. One thing that golf courses have done very well and embraced over the last even longer than 5 years is this idea of dynamic pricing. And that is, if the tee sheet's full and you want to be on it, it's going to cost you more money. If we don't have a lot of people coming to play, we'll give you a good break on it. And it doesn't matter what time of day, it doesn't matter what day it is. So long as the tee sheet's full, we're going to charge you more money. If it's weaker, we'll give you that discount. Topgolf doesn't work quite that way. They have buckets of time that those hourly bay fees apply, 37, 50 something, and 70, or whatever it is, at least for the one near me. So instead of having that model, you could say, okay, well, we'll have a minimum price, whatever that is, $22 an hour. I'm just making stuff up. And then it could be as high as $70 an hour if we're full up and we've got a 2-hour wait. And we could jack it up to even $120 an hour if we've got a 2-hour wait. But have people pay different prices based on how many people are at the venue. That way, if there aren't a lot of people there on a Tuesday afternoon, you give them a good low rate, give them incentive to come in, not only to use the bays, because there's an opportunity cost there regardless, right? If people don't use the bays, you don't make the money. If people use the bays, you make the money. It's either zero or whatever you charge them. So then you can add on the food and beverage, and then you start to do pretty well. So I think a dynamic pricing model could go a long way for this business. Again, with appealing to golfers too, the kind of hardcore golfer. You got to have ways to keep people coming into the bays, even if that inherent per hour cost is a little bit lower.
Hey, I hope they get it figured out. I hope that there is long-term sustainability, because the last thing any of these markets need is a behemoth structure like that has really very little other usage. They don't need those sitting empty. I mean, in many cases, they're already located next to malls that are a third unoccupied, if not more so. You know, you're not going to turn these into a school. It's a 3-level nightmare to try to figure out what you would do with the property. So I wish nothing but the best for Topgolf as they look at the trends, do their projections. And I hope that they turn around in 3 years from now, if somebody pulls up this podcast between these two idiots, and they say, "Well, these guys don't know what they're talking about. See, we got it all turned around. Great. I'm not rooting against Topgolf. I just don't think it's sustainable, and I think it's headed in a very perilous direction. So, Ryan, as always, it's good to have you with us. And by the way, before I let you go, you all need to know that within a very short amount of time, within the next few weeks, Ryan and I will reconnect, and we've got a really, really cool big time announcement coming. Ryan has been working, I don't even know how many hours, on a very special project that will bring more golf content to all of you in the ways you want to consume it. How's that for a nebulous description of what's coming?
That's a pretty fair way of putting it. I mean, I hope that people will be very excited when they hear what we've been cooking up, but it'll be there to see very soon.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.